realizing you're not your emotions, you're the experiencer of the emotion is such an incredible tool, because what it does is it allows you to take space in between the reaction, right? We get triggered in some say, or we have an event that happens, an incident that happens. Natural response is to immediately just react to it, right? And it's so powerful once you understand that you aren't the emotion, you aren't the thought.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Life Formula Podcast. With me, I have an amazing guest that I'm really excited to introduce to you, and that is Doug Cartwright. Doug is the author of Holy Shit, We're Alive. Such a beautiful book. It's an easy read. I highly recommend that everyone picks up this book. It is completely life-changing, to say the least. And just take a look at the cover art for those of you that's watching this on YouTube. It's still my favorite cover out of all the nonfiction books, personal development, self-help. You can't really see it behind me, but I have over 300 books, and this is by far my favorite cover. And you should definitely pick it up. The link to the book will definitely be in the descriptions and all the show notes, so you can check it out there. And yeah, let's get started. Doug, how are you?
Doing good, man. I live out here in Venice Beach, and it's like absolute perfect summer weather. It's 75, nice little breeze, and happy to be in LA right now.
Yeah, LA is a really interesting and amazing place. I've been there a couple of times, and here in Ohio, it's closely, oddly enough, weather related. It's like 75-ish here, so that's very interesting. But
Seems like we're both living good, Shaun.
We're living good, no complaints, no struggles, loving life. We're staying present. That's what it's all about. And it's a big theme in your book, is just celebrating the fact that we are alive. Because the odds of us being here at this exact moment, in this point in time, speaking to each other this way, it's a very, very small percentage, and we should celebrate that. So first question is, who was this book written for? Who was the target audience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the book kind of finds people when they're ready. I know that kind of sounds kind of like woo-woo, but the book is written for anyone who has done, per se, the checklist, right? They've gone to school, maybe they got married, maybe they bought their house, maybe they got the job they wanted, they drive the car they like. They kind of accomplished the checklist, per se, and then they got to a point where they're like, wait, now what am I supposed to do? Like, I've done everything that life and society has told me to do, and I don't really know what to do next. The book kind of was sparked by my own journey. I think, as I share in the book, I was really motivated and inspired in my own 20s, and got into a sales career really early and saw a lot of massive success financially. And, I made over $1 million when I was 24 in direct sales, and was kind of doing everything that society tells us to do. I graduated from the University of Utah and had a successful career and got to kind of a level of success externally. And kind of got to a point where I was like, wait, I don't know what to go next, because I've already checked all the boxes. And so, those that have read the book will follow along. I decided to take a different avenue in life, per se, and look down a different direction of, self-healing and self-introspection, and came across some really beautiful insights that I decided I wanted to share with the world in a very simple, easy to read. And I love that you mentioned the book is easy to read, because that was my intention. The goal with writing the book wasn't to write the most beautifully written book ever. It was to write a book that people would finish. And so I intentionally made it very easy to follow along, really inspiring, captivating stories to keep the reader engaged, and in hopes that people would get through the book and be able to take away all of the lessons that it entails.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. And for that same exact way, I do believe it is not woo-woo, because the book came to me. I first was introduced to the book through Nick at Booksingers around 2 years ago. And I've added the book immediately to my list, and I went through my list of books recently on Amazon. I'm like, this one is really calling out to me, so I'm gonna pick it up and read it. And I ordered it, and it came in the next day, and I read it in 2 days. It was exactly what I needed in this exact moment. So you're right. That's exactly who the book is for. It's exactly for the type of person such as myself, who just the universe, the source, God, creator, whoever you call it, handing me this book at the right time. And I'm really glad that you wrote this book. So thank you so much for writing the book. And speaking of woo woo, what are some of your favorite woo woo experiences, such as like biohacking, breath work, Reiki?
Yeah.
Which one of those, or what are some of those that actually created an impact in your life?
Yeah, it's funny with the word terminology woo woo. I always tell people I'm not woo woo, I'm just one woo. There's a woo woo scale. There's some really far out there stuff. And so growing up, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. And, the first question I always get is, did you grow up Mormon? And I did. I grew up in the LDS faith, the Mormon faith. And when you grow up in Utah as a Mormon, you're in a bubble, but you don't realize you're in a bubble when you're raised in a bubble. And so you kind of have this perception and paradigm of how the world works. And being raised in that religion, and I get the feedback too with anyone kind of raised in a Christian household. But when you're raised in that type of atmosphere, all of the hard questions of life are kind of answered for you, especially in Mormonism. Where did I come from before I was born? What's the purpose of life? What happens after I die? And these answers are instilled in you at a very young age. And so you just kind of accept that that's the realities of life, and everyone kind of knows that, and everyone's kind of on the same direction. And as you get older and becomes more self-aware, more self-conscious, and you have trials in your life, and things don't go according to plan, right? I think one thing's that all humans share in common is that life hasn't unfolded the way you thought it was supposed to, and we have these obstacles come in our life that really help, really cause you to look internal. And in my late 20s, again, I was at the pinnacle of my career and was seeing a lot of success, and I was managing sales teams, and I was the kind of the poster child at the company I was working for. I was doing the sales training videos, and I was kind of like maybe a mini little local celebrity in my specific industry. Things internally just weren't feeling right. I felt off. I felt a void. I felt empty, and the Mormon faith wasn't really resonating with me. It was something that I stepped away from. And so I was seeking that inner fulfillment. And I also realized I never really had it my whole life. I thought it was something that money would fill, and that wasn't the case. And so I decided, you know what? I said, what type of people seem happy? Like, what type of people seem fulfilled and at peace and calm? And I really craved that internal state of being at ease, that internal state of being confident, that internal state of being present and engaged. And we've all met people like that along our journey. You bump into someone, whether it's at an airport or at the farmer's market or something, and you just run into someone who just feels joyful. They feel cheerful. They feel at ease. And that emotional state was something that I deeply desired. Given, I had done, like I said, the checklist, and that wasn't doing it. And so one day I was like, you know what? I'm going to go dabble in maybe a world I'm not familiar with. I was really curious of how to kind of get those internal states. So I asked myself the question, I'm like, what type of person would I say feels happy and fulfilled? And it was, yogis, meditators, those into mindfulness, those who kind of had a spiritual relationship, which I thought was very woo-woo. Like, that's really weird stuff. But I really envied the internal states that they had. And so it was a very slow process. I started to open up and be open to new ways of being. And the first kind of a modality that really spoke to me is I remember going to a yoga class. And at this time, this is 2016, I'm 26 years old. And I'm a bigger guy. I've got a bigger frame. I'm 6'4", I weigh 220. And I was really into CrossFit. I'd go to CrossFit every day, like pump the iron, be masculine, grind your teeth. And it's all about like the pump and going for it. And the CrossFit gym I went to, there was a yoga studio right next door. And one of my actual CrossFit coaches encouraged me to go to yoga. They're like, hey, Doug, you should check out yoga, with the intention of it. If you're more flexible, you'll be able to lift better. It'll help your form. So I'm like, if it'll make me stronger, I'll go check out yoga. So I'll never forget my first yoga class I ever went to. It was a restorative class. And I didn't know the difference between, vinyasa flow or restorative at the time, but it was a restorative class. So it was really slow. And it had kind of like a meditation spa music per se. And the lights were turned down low. And I remember getting into this yoga class and I felt like I was at a spa. And we're doing the deep stretches, we're doing the downward dogs, we're doing the half pigeons, and just really like on our backs a lot of the time. And the teacher's burning candles and incense, and it was this really deep, calming feeling. And towards the end of a yoga class, anyone who's participated in a yoga practice knows that at the end they have what's called shavasana. And shavasana is kind of this celebratory moment at the very end where you're just in a deep state of relaxation and bliss. And we get to shavasana, I'm on my back, and my whole body is just feeling at ease. And I remember I had a brief moment where the chatter, the voice inside me, was always going 100 miles an hour with work and whatnot. It was just, my mind would never stop talking. I remember the voice slowed down and it got really quiet. And I remember in that moment being like, whoa, I haven't felt like this in years. And it was just a brief moment. And then, of course, the monkey mind goes back on and starts chattering. But I got a taste of it. It was a very glimpse of a taste of what that was. And so I remember in that moment feeling really called to yoga. And so I started going to yoga classes more often. And then I'd have teachers and facilitators who talked about meditation. And to me, meditation was weird. I was just always, I try and sit down and meditate. And I'm like, I'm doing it wrong. And I can't quiet my mind. And I'm uncomfortable. And this isn't working. But as I studied more and more meditation, really understanding that you can't do meditation wrong. And the purpose of it is to kind of just sit in awareness with your thoughts. And so I started practicing meditation. And again, that the chatter of the voice, it was like the volume got turned down. And that was such a relief given the anxieties and the frustrations and the overwhelms of my life. And so I was craving that, and it was starting to work. And so after a couple of weeks of meditation and whatnot, I start reading meditation books. And then, my personality is when I find a topic that interests me, I go like all in. I'll stay up late on YouTube and I'll read all the books and I'll read the Reddit forums and whatnot. And after kind of a deep dive into yoga and mindfulness and meditation and then kind of clean eating, eventually, those that follow along in the book, I came across psychedelic medicines. And to me at the time, that was like a whole different universe. Like, no way I'm ever going to go into the psychedelic realm. That's drugs. And if you do drugs, it's bad and you're going to die. And all these things. I had all these misconceptions based upon the society that I was raised in, how terrible and awful these things were. But having done my research, especially in the psychedelic space, of seeing the profound studies of what these substances can do in regards to mental health, anxiety, depression, whatnot, gave me enough courage to kind of go down that path a little bit more. And then probably 2017 to 2019, a little bit in 2020, I did a lot of psychedelic exploration. I very rarely participate in psychedelic experiences now, but in those studies or in those experiences, I was able to kind of unearth a lot of traumas and stories and help. I was able to heal some of these past traumatic experiences. So kind of a long-winded answer, but psychedelics were a big part of that. But to answer your question, what are some of the modalities I still participate in today? Definitely yoga, definitely meditation. And one thing that I'm really on right now is breath work. I do a breathwork session once a month at a studio here called Open here in Venice Beach. Shout out Open Venice Beach. But every Monday night at 6:30, I go to a breathwork session, and that really helps kind of help me get clear with my thoughts, brings me a lot of peace, a lot of joy, and helps me stay centered so I can tackle the obstacles that life throws my way.
Beautiful. There's a lot to unpack there, but one of those things we can unpack is yoga. I haven't fully experienced yet. I've attended maybe like 2 or 3 classes. But meditation was a huge game changer for me.
Yeah.
Probably around the same time when I was I was a senior in the class of 2017 going into 2018. And I just so happened to scroll through the app store and found this app called Insight Timer. And just doing some of those guided meditations for the first time for no reason. I was just curious and bored one day. Just opened my mind to this whole reality of that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness of our thoughts. And for the first time in my life, I was able to step back from those identities, those attachments that we had to who we thought we are. But we are not those things. We're just the experiencer of those things. And breath work Let's see.
Yeah,
The only breath work practices I've ever gone into is just the Wim Hof one, which has been really, really cool and
yeah,
exciting for me. I've done that a couple of times. And it's been coming a lot into my, you could say, my life a lot more recently, which is interesting. Maybe it's my reticular activating system, just looking for it more often, or maybe it's a sign I need to look more into it. I'm sorry, a moment ago you're about to chip in about something. Go ahead.
yeah. I was going to say that insight, taking a step back on the meditation piece, that paradigm shift of understanding that you are not your thoughts, you are the one who experiences the thought, truly can be a life-changing insight for a lot of people. And realizing you're not your emotions, you're the experiencer of the emotion, is such an incredible tool, because what it does is it allows you to take space in between the reaction, right? We get triggered in some say, or we have an event that happens, an incident that happens. Natural response is to immediately just react to it, right? And it's so powerful once you understand that you aren't the emotion, you aren't the thought. And in my life, I felt like I was a chicken with my head cut off, just responding and reacting to every little tiny thing that happened to me, trying to fix the world and fix everything. And it's very overwhelming. And eventually you learn that doesn't work. That technique doesn't work. And so the power of meditation and mindfulness really slows. I really believe that meditation, for me at least, has almost felt like it's given me a time machine to slow time down. Rather than being so reactive to everything, I get stimulated. Now I have a chance to kind of pause, take a breath, take a step behind, and then consciously and intentionally choose my response, which tends to be more in alignment with what's integrity in regards to the moment and the best solution given the circumstances. And my life as a whole, the pace of my life has slowed down dramatically. I'm still, I run a business now, and I coach a lot of clients. And even though my life production still maintains high production, the pace at what I move through is much more smooth and intentional and calm. And so I just wanted to, acknowledge you and give that shout out and just really expand on that, that idea of you are not your thoughts, you're the one behind them. It can definitely change the entire trajectory of your entire life.
I completely agree with you. And in that case, when I first came to this realization of how powerful meditation was, I had a self story that I was telling myself from it was a middle school heartbreak that I had. And from ages 13 until like 19 or so, I labeled myself that I was depressed and I was heartbroken and stuff like that. And once I came into this realization that I don't have to feel that way, that's not who I really am, I just had the biggest aha moment of my life. And, I dropped all of that emotional and spiritual stress, and it was a truly profound moment in my life. And what advice would you have for those people who suffers from anxiety? Because anxiety, they say, it's a very popular thing on social media. They say that anxiety is the fear of the future. What advice would you give to those people to help them be present and realize that, the future isn't real? There's infinite possibilities that can happen, from 1 second from now into 5 years from now. There is no controlling that, and the only thing that you can control is the present. And I know a lot of people suffer from anxiety, a lot of people in my personal life. What advice would you give that person to help them, whether it's through meditation or yoga or mindfulness? How would you help them, or at least talk them into getting the right steps of asking the right questions and on and on?
Yeah, it's a really great question and a lot to unpack there. And, anxiety is definitely something that a lot of people deal with, and it's very severe. I'm no doctor or professional in any regards, but the first thing I would say give yourself permission to be anxious. I don't think it's about getting rid of the anxiety. I think it's changing the relationship you have with your anxiety. And a lot of us believe that, and at least in my experience in the conversations I've had, is that people feel like they're bad or they're wrong or they're doing something wrong if they feel anxious. And then we want to get rid of it as soon as we can, and that something's wrong with us because we feel anxious. And first and foremost, there's nothing wrong with you for feeling anxiety. Anxiety is a normal part of life. I don't believe we have good emotions and bad emotions. I believe we have pleasant emotions and we have unpleasant emotions. There's emotions that feel good and blissful and euphoric to feel, and there's emotions that are uncomfortable to feel and they're unpleasant. When we label our emotions as good or bad, we then fall into this trap of, oh, I'm feeling anxious. I'm doing something wrong. I'm doing something bad. How do I get rid of it? Where the first step I would say is be okay feeling anxious. I know that sounds silly, but if you can just relax and be like, and label it, I am feeling anxious, and that's okay. That first step takes kind of that first layer of weight off of it. And then the second piece I would say is that all anxiety is suffering, unnecessary suffering, when we are attached to a specific result. Anxiety is there's something that I really, really want, and I'm afraid I'm not going to get it. Or there's something I really don't want to have happen, and I'm afraid it might happen. That's all anxiety is. And it's all future-based. So our conscious, our awareness, our focus can be in one of three places at a time. If it's focused on the past, and the story in your head is going to sound like, I should have done this. I can't believe I've done this. It's going to be a lot of regret. I can't believe I did this. I should have changed this. Why did I let this person say that? Right? It's going to create a sense of depression when we're on the past. When we're in the future, right, it's going to create anxiety. It's going to be tight. What if this happens? What if this doesn't happen? What if this thing I really, really want to have happen doesn't happen? Right? That's going to create tension and tightness. Where the reality is all our focus needs to be, and it's the most pleasant to be, is when it's in the present, when we're in the present moment. And so what's the tool to get from future-based thinking to present, or past-based thinking to present? And that tool is gratitude. I know it sounds cheesy and kind of corny, we hear it a lot, but really embracing gratitude. And so I have a 3-step gratitude practice I would share with anyone on the call. And so when I catch myself feeling anxious, first thing I'll notice my physical state. When you feel anxious, how do you physically feel? You're going to be tense, you're going to be tight, your shoulders are going to be up, you're going to be clenching your fists, you're going to be clenching your jaw, right? You're going to feel that tension. That's the first thing. So if I catch myself feeling that, I'm like, oh, I notice I'm feeling anxious. That's okay, right? I notice that my mind is getting caught up in the future of what if. So the first is I'm going to relax my whole body. I'm going to relax my shoulders, unclench my jaw, relax my hands, relax my forehead. And then I'm going to go into a gratitude practice. And the 3-step gratitude practice is the first step is someone specifically in my life who I'm grateful for, who I love dearly. This could be a friend, a colleague, a family member, a parent, right? Someone who I'm truly grateful for. And I think of that person, then I send them some love. The second step is something in your life that would be annoying if you didn't have any more, right? This is something to be really, really small, right? This is going to be your Google Maps on your iPhone. This could be the water pressure in the shower. This could be an umbrella that you have. This could be your 6-foot iPhone charger. This could be your shoelaces. This could be your NutriBlend blender. Just something in your life that would be annoying. It would be inconvenient if you didn't have anymore, right? Gets you really micro. And then the third one is an experience you had recently you're really grateful for. Something you've done recently that you have a really pleasurable experience. Was it watching the sunset when you're on a walk with your dog? Was it the lunch you had with a high school friend you hadn't seen in a long time? Was it a phone conversation from a friend? Was it last night when you got to watch the new Netflix series and you really appreciated the new Netflix series? Just any moment you've had recently that you're grateful for. And then the last step is texting the person number one that you're grateful for them. Wherever you are, grab your phone. Hey man, I've been thinking about you. You played a really big impact on my life. Just want you to know that I love you. Have a great day. So it takes 10 seconds. And so I think that tool alone is giving yourself permission to feel it, acknowledging it, labeling it. Secondly, relaxing the tension in your body, right? And then the third would be to get present. And the way we get present is through that gratitude practice. And so those would be the steps that I would encourage anyone who suffers from anxiety to help kind of navigate that relationship.
Is this a practice that you do daily or whenever you feel those unpleasant emotions or feelings?
Yeah, it's definitely, I do the gratitude piece daily. And, I still have a lot of anxiety. There are days where I feel really anxious and I might have to do this 10 times during the day, especially the relaxed piece, really relaxing. I might have to do that 50 times in a day, and that's okay. But as you do it more and more often, the anxiety, in my experience, tends to subside.
Going back to earlier, what you said in this conversation of leaving the Mormon faith, because a little bit of a background on
Mm.
myself was I grew up Christian. I wasn't a devout follower. I haven't actually read the entire Bible, just certain books. I was baptized, I believed, in 2015. But there was always something inside of me that always wanted to ask these questions. And whenever I seemed to ask those questions, I would receive some type of backlash, or you shouldn't ask those questions and you should be just in this box and just accept it as it is without questioning anything. And I always had this intuition that to really get to the truth of it all, why we're here, the purpose of life, where we're going after this life, you have to ask those questions and not just accept what people tell you. And that opened my world to spirituality. And in my opinion, this is not to get too crazy here, but I would much rather model my life in terms of looking at a spiritual, like monk or Buddhist monk, rather than a Christian in this society. Because I've met a lot of Christians who don't act in their faith or live that way, but a Buddhist monk, there's never been any wars over Buddhism that I can think of, so there's that. But speaking of people who you think has lived a well-lived life, or even say a perfect life, who would be some of those people who you think live that way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, spirituality is a really interesting conversation right now because you see it on Instagram, there's like kind of this spiritual revolution, and people then try and out spiritual each other. It's like, I've done more ayahuasca than you, I've gone to more burning man practices, my meditation's deeper, and you're just kind of playing the same game, just with a different name on it. And I felt like into that as well. Like, I'm no exception. I definitely, when I got in the spirituality space, I thought I had an ego about not having an ego, right? And as I've continued on this path, my opinion on it is, truly, I think the most spiritual people on earth are people you will never know. It's the second grade school teacher who buys supplies for kids out of her own pocket, doesn't tell anyone. It's the person who goes to the homeless shelter on the weekends and helps the homeless. It's the person that pulls over and gives someone a ride on the street. It's someone who gives unconditional love and service. And those are the people, and they don't tell anybody, and you never hear about them. And it's funny you bring this up. I just got back from Utah yesterday, attending the funeral of my best friend's mom, and I was truly inspired by a lot of the talks given by her kids, because every single one, talk after talk after talk, was an incredible example of unconditional love, unconditional service. And I think people that live the best lives are people who have surrendered their life and committed their life of service. And it's not about who's the most popular, who has the biggest following on Instagram, who wrote the best book. It's those people that you don't see on a day-to-day basis who I believe are living the best lives of truly. If you think about, in regards to Christianity, if you think about Christ-like behavior is just doing the right thing, living in integrity, being of service, being of love all the time. And so to answer your question, who's done it? There's so many people who've done incredible things on planet Earth and still are on the planet, who I'll never know. But it's those who dedicate their life of service, who are, I would think, living the most fulfilled life, because they're living their life of service rather than life of themselves.
Yeah, service is one of those keywords where, if you actually study these spiritual masters or people who claim that they have lived a well-lived life, they all dedicate service as probably the number one thing, because there's a saying that the more you give out, the more you get in return, and you're not supposed to be doing it just for that sole purpose of expecting something in return. But it just so happens that the goodwill compounds tremendously from how you serve and treat others in the world.
Yeah, I really, really believe that. I truly believe that the secret to living is giving. Truly, what you give will always come back to you. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that the more you give, the more you get. And one of my mentors, his name's Casey, he said something to me one time that really hit me. He said, if you don't give, he says, if you don't give when you have an extra $100, you won't give when you have an extra $1 million. And that really stood out to me. A lot of times you're like, well, I'm not in a financial situation. I can't write a check for $1 million to a charity. And it's less about the amount and it's more about the intention. If you don't have, I mean, everyone who's listening on this podcast has $5 that they can give, right? And if you're not willing to give when you have $5, you're not going to be willing to give when you have $1 million. And that really, really hit me. And so I did this, it makes no sense, but I did this little experiment that, in May and in June, I would go to the bank and I would take out a couple $100. And every time I saw someone asking for help or saw a stranger, I would give a stranger $100. Just, hey, felt like giving this to you. I remember I was on speaking tour and I was in a gas station in Gainesville, Florida. And there was this really nice gentleman, older gentleman who was sweeping, who was cleaning, who was mopping the gas station toilet. And I just went up to him and I'm like, hey, I really appreciate it. I want to acknowledge you as a human being and doing your hard work. And I want to give you some cash. And I'm not saying this to boast, but what ended up happening, it doesn't make any sense that those 2 months where I tried that experience were two of the best months in my company sales history. It's like, I can't explain it. There's no formula to it, but in my experience, the more I give, the more I get in return, and the more fulfilled and the more people I help. And just, when we give till it hurts, right? The internal experience that we feel internally, we can't put a price tag on that. You feel at joy, you feel at peace, you feel at ease, you feel inspired, and really you feel fulfilled, which is kind of the ultimate goal I think we're all striving for. And so, service is really, really important. Coming off this funeral yesterday, living a life of impeccable service is at the top of my list of, what kind of life do I want to live?
Would you say that it was like your intuition guiding you to give it the, per se, $100 to that specific person? Or did you just, no judgment, no thinking about it, just found the first person and gave it to them?
It's definitely intuition, I would say. It's just whenever you have the intention to give, life has this weird thing of putting the opportunity in front of your face. And who knows, maybe, I don't know what the person did with the money. I don't know their situation. I didn't follow up, but that's not my responsibility. It's just more of, can I offer this experience to someone? And so anytime I put myself in a situation to be of service, it's crazy how the universe will literally lay down the opportunity right in front of your face. And it's a really beautiful formula that doesn't make sense, but it's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. How do you trust your intuition? Because, there is someone that could be listening to this now or in the future to where, like, for example, they're in the wrong relationship and they just have a calling to backpack and solo travel to Chicago and live there. But it's like, I still got to pay rent. All my family still lives in this town. All my friends live here. I don't know what job I'm going to take. Or do you have a way to understand or being able to tap in and listen to your intuition and just how to trust and surrender to it?
Yeah, there's a real fine line between intuition and ego. And a lot of our ego is from our trauma responses, and that's a much deeper conversation. But on a very fundamental basis, if I can't decipher, is this thought I have is intuition or is it ego? The way I go about it is if it's about me, it's ego. If it's about we, it's intuition. Is this idea or this concept in my mind, is it going to help multiple people? Is it going to be of service to a friend? Is it to help a neighbor? Is it to inspire my partner? Probably intuition. If it's about what can I get, what would benefit me, ego. What will benefit we tends to be intuition.
But could you also make the agreement that, or understand that, in order to help yourself, you could potentially be helping the we? Like, for example, maybe moving to Chicago or to Utah or to Venice could put you in a better mindset or lifestyle to help you help other people.
Yeah, I think, again, it just goes back to this, another piece I would add to that too, is if you eliminated the fear of failure from the decision, what would you do? A lot of times we get intuitive hits. I need to move to Chicago or whatever, right? But there's a lot of fear about it, a lot of what if this happens, what if this happens, what if this happens, and that actually implements and distracts us, impedes us from making the decision. And so always ask yourself, if I had no fear, what decision would I make? And you'll know, you'll be guided. And, again, I would say intuition is for the moment. It's not a fortune teller. Intuition can't read the future. Intuition is to nudge us and give us the insight for the moment we're interacting with, for what's happening in our lives right now. And, following my intuition is scary. It's, you don't know how things are going to play out. But when I'm authentic and in integrity, and that's why I say meditation practice is so important, because it gives us that moment, that time to be quiet, to get calm, to let the dust settle, so we can kind of get in tune with our intuition. Because in my experience, intuition is a whisper. It's a really quiet voice, right? It's not a shout. It's not yelling. It's very quiet. It's very still. It's almost like you might miss it. It's very subtle. It's just a subtle nudge. And when we listen to the nudges and the whispers, that's in my experience of the universe, guiding us to the life we want to go. We got a life that's, designed for us.
There's a big section in your book that talks about your whole entire psychedelic experience and journey. Was that whole entire journey based off of following your intuition?
Yeah. I mean, it was really following my curiosity and my intuition, for sure. I have a different view on psychedelics now versus potentially when the book comes out. Obviously I've taken it much more seriously, and I don't believe psychedelics for everyone. And there's a lot of risks that are involved with that. And it was very much a necessary part of my journey. And I think, I look back at those times of when I, went and did these ceremonies with these shamans. And at the time, it very much was intuition. There was a lot of those ceremonies that I went to where I didn't want to go. I didn't want to do it. Anyone who's participated in psychedelic experiences know that they can be incredibly difficult. And I didn't want to do it, but the only way I can explain is I just knew that I was supposed to. And so that's what it could be a good example of intuition. It was like something I know I need to do this. I should do this. It'll be for the collective. I'll show up as a better version of myself for my family, friends, but I know I need to do it, even though I don't really want to. My ego didn't want to do it because it's difficult. But I knew if I'm being in integrity with the highest part of my soul, it was something I needed to do at that time in my life.
Yeah, admittedly, I haven't taken any psychedelics yet, but I am a firm believer in that, we only get one life here in this lifetime. So I think it's very important to experience all that you can, experience traveling around the world, experience meeting all these people, attending these events. And I think psychedelics, which I can't speak for anyone since I haven't taken any, could be a very important journey in their life, which I'm very, very open to taking psychedelics in the future.
What's changed? At the beginning of the call, I said I'm not woo-woo, but one thing that I will say that I still am woo-woo on is that if and when it's your time to have these psychedelic experiences, you will know. Like that it will come and get you. It'll be like this undeniable fire inside of you, and you'll just know. I don't know how to explain it other than that. So that is one thing I would still say I'm woo on. So if you're open to it, the opportunity will present itself. The reason I've stepped behind my psychedelic approach a little bit is just, there are a lot of consequences to it that aren't talked about as much. These experiences have the potential, not always, but have the potential to really shatter your constructs of reality at their core, fundamentally. If I knew the magnitude of the decision when I first went into it, I would have planned it very differently. Having my experiences are very, very profound for me. And again, if you want those to know exactly what those were, I share them in the book. But after my experiences, I left the religion I was raised in. I changed my diet. I changed where I live. I changed my job. I changed every major decision you have in your life, I've made changes on them, and they were the right decisions. But it's a lot of work. It's just a lot of work, and it's heavy, and it's overwhelming, and it's stressful, and it's lonely, and you're dealing with your traumas, and it's a really, really big decision. So I'm not against the work by any means. I'm more on the side of just, I hope everyone understands that the decision, if you decide to get into the psychedelic space, it has the potential just to be a really, really, really big decision, and a truly life-altering decision.
There was a big section in your book. I want to keep saying big section. It was a really important section which hit me. I highlighted the whole entire, paragraphs, and each word was control what's controllable. And I believe that you got that from Darren Hardy's The Compound Effect, which was one of the first books I've ever read completely from beginning to finish. Amazing book, by the way. If you haven't heard it, you're living under a rock. It's a necessary read for everyone, I believe. What are some areas of life where people have control over that they don't think they have control over?
It's a really good question, Shaun. And when you really break it down to what can I control, I think there's only two things we can actually control, right? We can't control people. We can't control other people's thoughts. We can't control other people's feelings about us. We can't control places. We can't control the weather. We can't control things. When you break it down, there's two things we can control. We can control our attitude and we can control our effort. Other than that, we don't have much control. We can't control results. We can't control outcomes. I can control my attitude and I can control my effort. And so I constantly try and remind myself of that daily. Like the only thing I can control my input. I can control how hard I work out of the gym. I can control what I eat. I can control what I put in my body. I can control what I learn. And I can control my demeanor and my enthusiasm at which I go into my day, into my conversations, into my work. Other than that, there's not much we can control. And so I think that's actually understanding that and embracing that. It provides a giant sense of relief because we don't let outcomes outside of our control dictate our happiness levels. And when you can kind of surrender to that point of view, the quality and the enjoyment of life enhances dramatically.
So just giving your answer on that, I would say that, with the topic of goals, you don't focus on, the achieving $10 million per year, but it's about the daily inputs, the small habits of what you can control to get there. That's a good, some eye candy to look at, but you don't focus on that. Do you focus on like those tangible things that you can control daily or so?
Yeah, I definitely set goals. I set goals every single day, and it's less about wanting to achieve the goal, and it's more about gaining a sense of direction, right? I would love to have, a $200 million business. That's a goal. And so what inputs can I do on a daily basis to move me in that direction? It's more about giving me a sense of direction. It's giving me optimism. It's giving me something to work on. It's giving me clarity. It's giving me the ability to focus and to concentrate and not get distracted. And I'm totally unattached to getting that goal. So if it comes, great, exciting, I'll celebrate and whatnot. And my self-worth isn't dependent upon me getting this goal. If I don't get it, I'm going to be just fine. But I'm working for a noble cause. And, as corny as it sounds, you hear this all the time. It's not about the destination. It's all about the journey. Yeah. Who can I become? Who do I need to become in order to achieve this? And who am I going to become? And what lessons am I going to learn? I really believe that the purpose of life is just life. You get to have the experience. We learn through experience. It's the only way we learn is through experience. So moving in that direction every day provides a new opportunity to have a new experience. And how beautiful is that?
Yeah, for me, back in, it was 2021, I was working at a Walmart distribution center. And it was good pay for my area and definitely for my age. I'm only 23 now. I was 21 2 years ago. And I just had this calling to just solo trip from Ohio to Oregon and back. So I drove 7,800 miles in 8 days from Ohio to Oregon and back. And I approached this place just out of curiosity on my way there in Oregon called Crater Lake. And I sat down there and it was a beautiful place. It was May, but even though it was still snow-covered tops, and it was a really breathtaking place. And followed my intuition, and I decided to do a meditation because the whole entire trip was based off of trying to figure out what is the purpose of life. And my answer then, and still to this day, which I strongly believe, I'm still open to change my beliefs on that, but still to this day, over 2 years ago, when I asked the question, what is the purpose of life? The answer is within that question, just rearrange the words. And my answer was then and still now is the purpose of life is a life of purpose. And so I just, once I came across that, I was like, and not to take life so seriously and just stay present and whatever your definition of living a life full of purpose, whether that's serving or however you define it, is how I view the purpose of life.
I love that concept because I don't think we are born with a specific purpose. It's not like you need to go find your purpose. It's not in the backyard hiding underneath a rock, right? The purpose of life is whatever purpose you give it. Whatever, just to to echo what you said, like the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose, and you can bring purpose to anything you do, whatever you choose to, and you are the creator and you get to choose. And as you know, that's just a really beautiful insight. So I love hearing that.
And that's exactly how it was for me. I was trying to find it, but then I came to a realization that you have to create it. And I've been seeing you on social media recently do this practice, which I would appreciate if you shared it, where you journal, I believe. And the one part of it which got me really interested was you write 20 answers to the question of, who am I? What does that mean to you? What does that practice? How does that impact you?
Yeah, so I do a daily practice. The first part, I call it the 3M in the top 10. By getting to the top 10, so I'll write down my top 10 goals in life every day, kind of like what am I achieving, like tactical things, business sense, health sense, relationship sense. And then on the next page, I'll write at the top, I'll write, who is Doug Cartwright? I'm a big believer that nothing invokes change quicker than identity change. So I'll write down 20 ideas and concepts of who I am and try and embody them. So the first one I write down every single day is who is Doug Cartwright? Number one, a force for good. Number two, an absolute joy to be around. 3, someone who lives a life of service. Number 4, a badass entrepreneur and author. A top CEO, an engaged family member, a loyal partner, a loyal friend. Inspired, creative, grounded, steady, at ease, a deep meditator, a healthy eater, a clean eater, an early riser, someone who loves and takes care of their body. And I write down all of these attributes and identities that I hope to embody. And I tell myself that every day, this is who I am, this is who I am, this is who I am. And so if I, instill my subconscious mind with all of these concepts and ideas, I then go out into life and prove to myself that that's who I am in my actions, how I show up for others. And so I would say no practice in my life has inspired more change than that single practice alone.
Yeah, they say that scientists have said that 95% of our reality comes from our subconscious programming. So however you want to experience your reality, most of it comes from your childhood, from ages 0 to 7 is what they say. Then after that, it's all like hardwire. And I do agree with that, because the book Psycho-Cybernetics really opened my mind to the story that we tell ourselves. And that could be a whole entire new episode tangent about how that book's impacted me, what that's all about. But identity change, changing the story that we tell ourselves, even alter egos. Like, for example, look at Beyonce with Sasha Fierce, completely different embodiments. And who else? There's a lot of different sports athletes who use different alter egos to achieve the outcome that they want and have. And it's very important. I do agree with you. I'm gonna have to reflect on that. To maybe I might have to do your practice. I might have to do that. Take it from myself. Take it from you.
Dive in.
That sounds very exciting. Big question. My big question for the podcast. So this podcast is called Life Formula, and my goal and hope is to interview amazing guests like you to get their perspectives on what is the best formula possible to live their lives. Like, what actually matters in life. So my question to you, if you could create a formula, for example, relationships plus following intuition plus psychedelics equals great life, or however you want to mess around with the formula, what would your perfect life formula be?
That's a great question. I would simplify it into one statement. It would just be radical self-love and acceptance. And the reason I say that is because when you truly, truly, truly at your core love yourself and accept yourself, you no longer seek or need the validation of anyone in the outside world. And when you can move through life without this desire for external validation, it gives you this sense of confidence to go for it, to share your gifts, to share your art, to create new things, because how it lands doesn't affect your self-worth. And I would say the biggest secret to life is if you can really at your core learn to love yourself and accept yourself, it's the ultimate superpower, because you literally are untouchable. And it doesn't mean you self-love yourself. It doesn't mean you're selfish. It allows you to live a life of service, but it gives you permission just to be who you truly are. And that's what the world needs, is people to be who they truly are.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And that ties to what I've heard Tom Bilyeu say on impact theory, is one of the founders of Quest Nutrition. He said the only belief that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. Like if you're stranded on an island, butt naked, your self-belief is the only thing that's going to matter in this entire world at that point. And self-love is truly an inward journey. It's not an outward journey, it's an inward journey. And
yes,
Doug Cartwright, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you to help you support you, to purchase your book, your socials? Where can people help serve you and your mission?
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. My Instagram, that's where I'm the most active, is on Instagram. It's at Doug_Cartwright. I do answer all my DMs. And you can find my book on Amazon. Holy shit, we're alive.
Awesome. And the link to all of his socials and the book will be in the show notes and description. And thank you again, Doug, for this episode. This may be my favorite episode I've recorded so far. So thank you so much. And hopefully we could collab again in the future. That would be super, super awesome.
Thank you, Shaun. And I'll see you next week at the Summit of Greatness.